areas.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
This is your latest Teachers Talk Radio News with Gail Glenn. In Scotland, the First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has announced that the wearing of face masks and social distancing in schools will remain for the first 6 weeks of the new academic year, which begins around the 16th of August. She stated that this also reflects the unique environment of schools, where large numbers of unvaccinated children and young people mix with adult staff. So for up to 6 weeks, subject then to review, there will be a continued requirements for staff to keep at least 1 metre distance from each other and from children and young people while on the school estate. She said, "We have also decided, after careful consideration, to retain the current requirements for face coverings in schools for staff and for children aged 12 or over. This includes asking young people and staff in secondary schools to wear face coverings during lessons and while inside school buildings." The First Minister also announced a further £10 million to local authorities to be allocated for improved ventilation and CO2 monitoring equipment in schools. In England, research carried out by Oxford Homeschooling using Department for Education data has monitored the largest increase and decreases in bullying exclusions between 2018-19 and 2019-20. Barking in Dagenham was the largest hotspot, showing a 200% increase in the number of suspensions and permanent exclusions from bullying. Figures were shown to more than double in 10 local authorities. Nationally across England, the data is more positive, and this is thought to be the result of school closures affecting the amount of time which students spent in contact with one another. The number of bullying exclusions fell by 31% in 2019-20. Greg Smith, Head of Operations at Oxford Homeschooling, said, "These new exclusion figures cover the whole of the 2019-20 school year, but with the final term being conducted during lockdown, it's interesting to see how the data compares to previous totals. In many ways, the measures introduced during the pandemic, like reduced class sizes and increased supervision, have helped address the country's bullying problem. So it will be interesting to see if schools try to adopt some of these permanently, even though restrictions are easing." This has been your daily education news briefing.
So tell me, where are you listening this morning? I recognise a couple of listeners. I know that we've got a listener here who's listening in Suffolk. I know we've got someone in Essex. Where are you listening? Have we got any international listeners on this morning? Because I know we've got some presenters who present from Dubai. Anybody who's presenting, sunny Bournemouth. Thank you, Mal. Got someone from Swansea in Wales. Someone make me absolutely jealous with the sunshine. Bournemouth sunny this morning, Mal. So I just want to get a feel for where we are this morning. International Stowmarket, fantastic. I was in Stowmarket the other day and I can tell you, I can confirm it is most definitely international, glorious. And I can confirm it has the most beautiful, ever you're there, most fantastic bakery, the Little Pig Bakery. If I can encourage anyone to holiday in Stowmarket, there you have it. They do a marvellous cruffin if ever you want to get there. So yeah, fantastic and brilliant. We've got some questions coming in as well, so around best bets practice. So I'm going to keep that one for when we get Andy and Bex in a little bit later as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing a bit more about where our listeners are today. And tell me a little bit more about what you've got planned for the day. Inspire me and let me live vicariously through you, because I think my day plans are a little less exciting. And if you're entertaining children at home, please send me some ideas. because at the moment I'm starting to get a little bit of homeschool flashbacks. The start of the holidays for me, as someone who's been working a little bit from home during this period, when my children, I've got primary school age children, 8 and 10. And when the school holidays started, whilst I had that mixture of still feeling like obviously I want to spend time with my children, absolutely. But I don't want anyone to get the impression I wouldn't want to, particularly my own children, who I'm pretty sure are in earshot. But it's having that arsenal of ideas of what to do with your own children. So if you do have ideas, please text those in, because there's only so many ways I can reinvent a crispy cake. And again, there's only so many ways that I can start thinking about how to make colouring in exciting. So I think, absolutely, picnics, please, play dates. There's so many things that we can do. Oh, someone's got a birthday, so they're off to the zoo. Now, the zoo, that's something that we absolutely have to do. So it's about, is there a way of us sharing ideas around voucher codes as well? Because I couldn't believe the price of a family ticket to go to the zoo. But again, absolutely, I agree with you, Sarah. I can't handle any more craft. The thought of me getting the glitter out absolutely sends me into, some kind of trauma flashbacks around that one. That absolutely terrifies me. However, my life hack for that is glitter glue, because actually you can get the best out of glitter without it going everywhere. Okay, Libby's got a great idea here, built a climbing frame, although she lives at the bottom of it. Yeah, I can absolutely understand that one. But the Olympics, now I have got both of mine, well, my husband particularly, but watching the Olympics have been absolutely great. So if anyone's got any ideas, perhaps an obstacle course in the garden, that might be a great idea. But if you can share any ideas for how we can start thinking about entertaining children at home, come on, we're teachers. And I think that's perhaps a misnomer, because as teachers, if we have play dates, I know that for the past 10 years, my friends who aren't teachers, when we have play dates, they tend to look to me in terms of, can't you entertain the children because you're a teacher? And I'm I'm secondary school trained, and I've absolutely no idea how to entertain younger children. But my friends would always look to me. And if we set up any craft activities, it would tend to be me that was left sat at the craft table. So, any ideas, please feel free to share them. And as Libby says, her children are now enjoying listening to Teachers Talk Radio. And I can't think of any better activity for children. So how have you been spending your holidays so far? I know, Mal, you've been sharing that you've been off camping. But has anybody here, made a conscious decision to spend this holiday break differently after the year that you've had? And this is going to be one of our topics today. There's been lots of debate online about how teachers spend their holiday time. Do you find that you need time to defrag? My family, my immediate family are very aware that I need time to decompress after a school year. Do you use your time to plan, to prepare, and to think? I absolutely use my holiday time, and I factor into my summer holiday time to think. I can actually feel my brain expanding in my head after the pressure of the school year. I can feel it sort of expanding again, and I use that time not to sit down and fill in lesson plans at all, but absolutely to think outside the box and to start thinking creatively. And I think that sense of stigma around how I might want to use my time, and a sense of judgment about how teachers might want to use their time, is something that we need to be able to challenge, because it's about our choice. About, as professionals, we're adults, because we would never want to press judgment around the pupils and the students that we teach, that if they wanted to read classics, if they wanted to read around their subject, I can't imagine that we would ever want to pass judgment on a student or a pupil for wanting to read around their subject during the holiday time. Similarly, I find shifting from fifth gear to first gear immediately on the first day of the summer holidays, or even the Easter holidays, just doesn't work for me. And I need opportunity to just take it down gradually. And actually, I know that often we talk about this as teachers, the first week of the holidays, I'm often either ill or wiped out, and holidays, quite grumpy actually. Sarah's sharing that she's just finished Zoe and Mark Enzer's CPD curriculum, and it's given so much to think about, and you actually have the time and headspace to do this thinking. And personally, I agree with you. I've always found that the holidays give me that time to process what I'm reading. rather than feeling like I need to knee jerk and rush into school and do something immediately with what I've just read, or knee-jerk panic and go into a meeting and implement what I've read into, redrafting schemes of work, or immediately rushing into school and sort of like pepper spraying people with this information, imparting it and cascading that sense of panic. I have that time to process. Someone's actually shared as well, I always get ill in the holidays. And that's that sense of, that adrenaline keeps you going. And then as soon as that adrenaline stops, your immune system drops as well. And that's when our immune system falls down and those bugs come in. And Libby's sharing as well, you actually sit and read real books, not just educational books, and it relaxes your brain and your mind. And I think that's one of the questions we're going to be posing today as well is, do you have an educational book on the go at the same time as a fiction book? I always have my education books, as I call them, my edu books. I have my to be read pile and I have my fiction pile on the go at the same time. But I tend to get drawn towards my edu books. And I don't know whether that's because, perhaps it's because when I'm accessing those edu books, because I feel like I'm being productive, it eases my sense of getting through and being productive, or whether or not if I'm reading fiction, I feel a sense of guilt that I'm not being productive. And, we don't always need to be productive. There's that great image and that metaphor around the fact that we're not a coffee pot. Our worth isn't measured by our productivity. And I need to give myself, I'm aware, I need to give myself permission to not always be productive. And I love fiction. I'm an obsessive. This is my guilty pleasure. I own it, but I'm an obsessive Jilly Cooper collector. And absolutely, I agree. Any reading is productive. And this is what we tell our pupils. This is what I tell my children. And this is the message that I need to tell myself. And sometimes as teachers, perhaps we are our own worst enemy, and the messages that we tell the children that we teach, perhaps we don't always adhere to them ourselves. And I absolutely agree that any reading is productive. I just perhaps need to listen to that myself better. And Mal says she's currently got 3 books on the go. I'd love to know what you're reading, but 2 fiction and 1 coaching book. And Rachel, I think that's you, R. Rossi. Similarly, just going into school when we're ready to have a good clear out, and a declutter can be therapeutic and provide a springboard for re-expansion of the mind. Absolutely agree. I used to love going in and doing my classroom and just getting down that display. And I know that if I don't say this, someone will hunt me down, but please take the staples out of your board. Please don't take a display down and not remove the staples. That's terrible etiquette, especially if you're moving classroom. But absolutely having that clear out. And I think all of us have an awareness of Marie Kondo. Or if you're not aware of Marie Kondo, you might be aware of Stacey Solomon, who I love and adore. And Stacey Solomon and Marie Kondo, I'm appealing to the masses here, would say that you can't have a good clear out if you don't clear out everything. Don't try organizing a drawer whilst there's still stuff in there. But it really absolutely is. I love that phrase, a springboard for a re-expansion of the mind. I'm going to steal that because it is so true. And don't feel judgment about going into school during the holidays. There's so much debate about that online at the moment, because you don't get that time without someone coming in and during the term time, without people coming in and taking that time away. It just gives you that opportunity to think clearly around how you want that space to work for you. But it also gives you that opportunity to really think about where you want things, how you want that space to look. Going back to books though, Libby's saying she can only read 1 book at a time. Brain can't handle more than one. Libby, I think it's fair to say you've got a lot going on, but it's managing children, managing reading 1 book at a time. But it's about what works for you as well, and about the speed that you can read as well, and about what information you're processing, and about what works for the reader as well. And I like to dip in and out of books. I don't always read a book in its totality. I tend to read a chapter and then maybe come back to it as well. And I know some people get very frustrated with how I read books. Is it Gail saying, I also find that if I do a bit during the holiday, it makes the start of term less frantic? Absolutely. And yeah, the sunny weather has made it much easier for being able to read. Mal's sharing with us what she's reading. 1984. Wow. Bad Dog and Coaching with Personality Type. Oh, I'm going to list some of these down. Rachel's impressed herself with that phrase. Great. Okay, well, you've coined it, so you own that phrase now, and I'll be able to quote you when I use it again. Sarah's just finished Girl, Woman, Other, and you'd highly recommend it. Excellent. So we're getting some, I mean, this is the hardest thing, isn't it? And this is one of the things we want to talk about today. It's, it's knowing where to start. And I actually find myself, I went into Waterstones for the first time in about 18 months. And just the smell, the smell of books, you just can't beat it, can you? And I went in, I just did not know where to start. I was completely overwhelmed. We can scroll through websites, but it's knowing where to start. And there are so many books, and at the moment there are so many people who are publishing education books, and unless we have a personal recommendation, or we know the person, or that person's got a strong following on Twitter or online, it's really hard to know where to start. And I think it's just so helpful when we have these recommendations, or we come from a school that has a strong understanding around evidence-informed research, that we have an understanding. But I think it's always great as well that you can have friends or colleagues, or you can have an online following or involvement where you can have fiction recommended as well. And I really miss being able to take part in book clubs where they recommend it. I've got another great recommendation, Such a Fun Age. And thank you. The summer library challenges. Do you know, I had no awareness of those until about a year ago, which I feel extremely guilty about. Again, I'll let the guilt go. I'll let the guilt go. But the summer library challenges are a great way of entertaining the kids. And I have seen that there's some of the local libraries, which we are really fortunate in Suffolk to have really proactive rural libraries. But there's summer library challenges, if you haven't already, if you've got young children or teenage children, a great way of getting your children involved with reading. But absolutely, during term time, hard to keep up with all the bestsellers. And you can definitely succumb to FOMO and that fear of missing out. And I agree, summer holidays, they do give you that time to catch up. And there shouldn't be that sense of pressure around, have you read this? Have you read that? It's okay to say, no, I haven't. And it's also absolutely okay to say, to dip in and out and to sort of have a look at, to read the Twitter thread to get a sense of what something's about. And also, if you're really interested in a topic, and this is something that Andy Samways, who's going to come on shortly to talk about, is if you're ever really interested in a topic, one of the best places to start in terms of educational research is the Education Endowment Foundation guidance reports, because you're looking there at a 10-15 minute read, as opposed to investing what can take me a good couple of weeks to read in terms of a longer book. So I think, in terms of an education read, I think, it's really important that we don't put an additional layer of pressure on ourselves to keep up with peers, because as teachers, we already laden ourselves under so much pressure that we don't need to keep putting ourselves under even more pressure to keep up. And as Sarah is saying, she's got a list on her phone of fiction books she's got recommended. So she's got a go-to list. Please share the wealth, Sarah. If you can just share a couple of those, or ones that you've read and recommend, please. That would be great. We'd like to know what you'd recommend there. That'd be fantastic. Okay, so I'm just having a look at the time, just so we haven't gone over. Starting to have a look how we're getting on here. Okay, fantastic. So we've got someone coming in that'd like to come in as a caller. So I'm going to just check how, and you're brilliant for bearing with me as I work out how to manage the on the call element. It just popped up. So give me one moment. I may sing along to you. I won't do, but that just popped up as on the call. And I'm just going to, oh, here we go. And Mal's just given us another great book to read, Two Opposite Sides of a Coin. It's a debut book by Dominic Wong. Now, bear with me because it says on the call. And I'm just going to find out how I accept somebody for on the call. Let's have a little look. We've got a couple more comments coming through. So I'm going to ask Mal to very kindly pop in the chat for me if I've got someone who's on the call. Here we go. I think I've just worked it out. Here we go. So I haven't got your name because it's just come in as a username. But if you want to just come in, I'm going to let you call in. Oh, it's Andy. Here he is. I've not connected you yet, but I'm going to connect you. It's Andy. Here he is. I'm going to welcome him in a couple of minutes. Hi, Andy. I'm just going to let you say hello, but I'm going to welcome you in a couple of minutes. That'd be fantastic. Hi, Andy.
Good morning, Lizzie. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. That's perfect. I'm going to let you in a couple of minutes, but it's fantastic to hear from you.
Brilliant.
That's great. Fantastic. Oh, it's great that you're here, though. Thanks, Andy. I'll welcome you in a couple of seconds. Brilliant. Okay, so before we start and we welcome in Andy, what we're going to do is just going to have a moment just to reflect, though, because one of the things I found really interesting when we were looking at how we use our holiday time was a bit of research that came in. One of the things that really interests me is around psychology, because I'm using my holidays and I am keen to sort of live vicariously through those people who are doing fun things and going kayaking like a friend of mine is today and paddleboarding. I'm using mine to write a dissertation. So if anybody wants to send me the love over the next couple of weeks, I'm hammering out 10,000 words on imitation and inhibitory control. So so please, if anybody can send me any advice on how to curb procrastination, I would very much appreciate it. Because in terms of inhibitory control, the irony is, it turns out I have very limited inhibitory control. It's terrible. But I guess that's the kind of meta study that I'm going through at the moment. But one of the elements of sort of psychological research they've done around holiday periods I found was really interesting. Because actually they did do a piece of research in the Netherlands, and they actually found that there was this kind of decline in well-being when people went on holiday, and it was related to this sense of rising levels of workload. But interestingly, and I don't want to spark a massive debate here, but it's going to, but it was more pronounced in women. And this is a piece of study that was carried out in 2013, and I'll put this piece of research on Twitter. And it was more pronounced in women because in this piece of research, there's 96 Dutch workers involved because they experienced a rise in home load. And my understanding from reading the research is that the women were carrying more load associated around washing, packing, organization of getting the family ready to go on holiday. And actually, before they went on holiday, that period was much more stressful. And interestingly, that period when those first days off, there were lots of physical complaints. And that was, there was different names given to that, such as transitory stress, environment shock, leisure sickness. And that's what, several studies actually suggested that the start of a holiday period is for many people spoiled by high blood pressure, poor sleep quality, bad mood, lack of initiative. And, and these people were coming up with serious bodily symptoms like fever, migraine, upset stomach. I'm not here to completely depress you, because there were other good things that came out of it as well. And this piece of research was saying that, imagine the reaction of your car engine. And this is the analogy that I use that stemmed from this research. If, you shifted your car engine from fifth gear directly into first gear, and it's the same as if a stressed human body shifted from full speed in those weeks preceding a holiday straight down into a flash. And they were talking about, actually, how can we, get the holidays to work for us, and what can we do? So if we are going to be going away on a holiday, what can we do? Because there is so much scientific evidence demonstrating that a holiday boosts health and well-being and positively affects your work performance. And more importantly, in your work performance is around what can we do actually to make holidays work for us. And it's about making optimal use of your leisure time. So instead of spending them like I do, thinking about where do we go, how long do we go for, what do we do when we get there, but really focus on the things that really matter. So thinking about, if we can, a smooth start of that holiday period, trying to, wherever possible, mentally disengage from everyday worries, if only that were possible at the moment. And remember, a lot of this research is pre-pandemic. So actually, if we could disengage at the moment, I think wouldn't that be ideal? But really, I think one of the things that we could perhaps from this research put in place now for us is about that memorable end of the holiday period. And I think that's one of the things that we can plan is trying to think about what could we do at the end of this summer holiday to make it a memorable opportunity. Can we plan something nice now for the end of the summer holiday, that August bank holiday? I think we're going to struggle to book accommodation, guys, I'll be frank. But what is there something nice that we can do for ourselves, with our friends, with our families? What can we do? But also, is it possible for us to mentally disengage as teachers? Does that mental disengagement mean not reading around our subject, not engaging in this evidence-informed research? And, does it have to create feelings of stress when you read research? Does it have to mean mental disengagement? And, like we've talked, many of us actually say that I love that phrase, where is it, Rachel? Does it really give us a feeling of stress, or that time where we're not mentally disengaging, but actually we are touching base with our school, we are reading, we're decluttering our classroom environment, and actually we're gaining a springboard for a re-expansion of our mind. So that's one of the things that we're going to talk about today, but we're going to start off after our advert break, and we're going to actually be talking about thinking about how do we get started in evidence-informed research? What is evidence-informed research? Because it's a phrase that's bandied about so often, but actually, do we know what it is? And thankfully, I've got an expert guest that's going to talk about that. And how can we factor it in to bring it into our classroom, and so on. So I'm going to start with an advert break, and then I'm delighted to welcome Andy after our advert break.
Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers. At Creative Resources, we've been rethinking what a classroom can be. We've created a huge range of more than 2,500 original and exciting resources that span across more than 15 different subject areas. Whether you're looking for primary or secondary level resources, careers options, PSHE, arts or humanities, Creative Resources have the resources for you. We offer full curriculum packages and unique challenging escape rooms themed on topics such as Shakespeare, Tudors and fractions. We have quizzes, task cards, Tarsia puzzles and lots more. Better still, more than 100 resources can be accessed for free. Just visit our website www.cre8tiveresources.com. You can get 10% off any order you make on our website by using the discount code TTRadio. Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers. Every teacher loves stationery, right? Imagine getting a selection of fun, beautiful and unique stationery items designed and selected especially for teachers, delivered through your door every month. You need to check out teacherslovestationery.club.
I'm always so excited when the box arrives. It's such a treat.
My Teachers Love Stationery Club box is just a little treat to myself every month.
It's always full of delightful and surprising items, including some really good quality stationery brands like Faber-Castell and Stabilo.
And because you never know what you're going to get, it makes it even more fun and special when you get it.
It feels really great to be supporting a family business that's run by real teachers. I can't help feeling like they just know what I'm going to enjoy using stationery-wise better than I do myself.
Visit teacherslovestationery.club and enter the code TTRadio when you buy your first stationery box to save £2 today. teacherslovestationery.club. Introducing the Leadership Masterclass series by Diana Osagi. Learn how to ditch your fears and develop your leadership confidence. How to deal with difficult colleagues. How to thrive when you lead in a challenging environment. And how to get colleagues to buy into your vision. Join Diana for her online leadership masterclasses, starting on the 10th of July and running all the way through the summer. These sessions are the perfect way to prepare and refresh for the next academic year and beyond. Book your place at courageousleadership.co.uk/events now. The first 50 leaders to sign up get an additional free mini coaching session with Diana herself. Don't miss this. Courageous Leadership Masterclasses at courageousleadership.co.uk/events.
Okay, thank you. So I'm absolutely delighted now to be joined by Andy Samways. Andy is Director of Unity Research School. Which is part of the Education Endowment Foundation Research Schools Network, and he is Director of Unity Teaching School Hub. Thank you so much for joining us, Andy, on the call.
Pleasure. Lovely to be here.
Thank you ever so much. So we've got you as our expert, so there's no pressure there at all.
Well, yeah, I really would not be suggesting expert. I'm on a continuum of novice to expert. I'm becoming less novice, shall I suggest, I think, and ever learning, I think, would be the case.
Well, Rachel's here live. Rachel's here in the studio as well, so I think Rachel Rossi. So I think she'll be probably contradicting that as well. But we're going to start off with some questions and interrogate you a little bit, if that's okay.
Go for it, yeah.
And we've got people in the here listening as well, and they can text in with any questions that they've got around evidence-informed research. The first question we've got is around how we can make research more accessible, not just to teachers, but to teaching assistants and any staff working in schools. And I guess our starting point has got to be, what is evidence-informed research?
Yeah, well, if you don't mind, I'm just going to sort of tweak that, because I think the key part that I would feel confident in talking about is evidence-informed practice.
Oh, perfect.
And from a starting point, I think you're exactly right. It's being clear with the terms, isn't it? As a geographer, the terms have always been the things that I've wanted to get set at the beginning. But so in terms of evidence-informed practice is very much about bringing evidence alongside practice. Evidence-informed practice involves using and promoting a thoughtful blend of evidence, I'd suggest. Three areas, for example, we're using external research, so research conducted by other people in the past to outline what has seemed to be working in some particular context. It uses different kinds of data, doesn't it? It uses data from at the start as a baseline. It uses it somewhere along the way as processes, and at the end to evaluate impacts, I think. And that's one of the challenges that we find. And the third one is about using your own inquiring, your own cycles of inquiry to test out what's happening with you in your own context. So I think it is about bringing evidence alongside practice. And from a research school's perspective, we often talk about three requirements to bear in mind. The first one about being that evidence supplements experience, it doesn't supplant it. Really, really important is that it comes alongside with that which you have got already. People aren't empty vessels, are they? We come with experience and knowledge of context, but evidence comes alongside and supplements that and can help make better judgments. I think that's the key part. The second one of the three is about evidence provide best bets. And if you really want to try and tie ourselves up, best bets at best. It says what has happened or has been seen to happen in the past in a certain context. And therefore, if you're looking to use evidence, it's about saying, well, it could provide this in the future if the conditions are the same or very similar and are able to be used in that way. And I suppose the third one is paraphrasing Dylan Williams' work about, it's not about looking for what works in education, it's saying about what has worked and under what conditions. So going back to your question, I'd always draw back to about evidence coming alongside practice, but also considering very clearly the context that you're considering it from.
I think that's the most empowering aspect of it for me, because I think one of the sort of misnomers is that many people feel that so much is done to them in terms of guidance that's cascaded down. Whereas one of the most empowering aspects that I felt in terms of learning more about evidence-informed research is that it's about understanding, first of all, that none of us are empty vessels. I just love how much my knowledge and my experience is taken into account, and that makes me feel valued and my experience across various sectors. It makes me feel worthwhile, but also in terms of applying it to the context that I'm working in, because I've worked in a secondary mainstream schools, but I've also worked in a special school with pupils who have social, emotional, and mental health needs. And those different contexts, the evidence-informed research and the practice wouldn't apply the same in both environments. And so that's why I find that conversation so powerful.
Yeah, and the Education Endowment Foundation, I always remember it very early on when we became a research school organisation. One of the part they talked about the last mile problem, and they termed it the last mile problem in that the hardest thing to do is to translate a particular effective practice or practices in a school and take it a mile down the road to the nearest school. Because even just a mile down the road, and we know this from our own context in our own trust schools, we've got schools literally down the road from each other where the context is different, and therefore having an understanding of saying it's not about magpieing and saying I'm going to take that and put it here. It's about saying, well, what is it that's working? Why is it working? How is it working? And then thinking about, well, what elements of it do I have in place in the context I'm moving it to or considering it for, and what do I need to be aware of if I'm going to implement it in that way?
And so I think taking that, when we're considering if we're reading research or the EEF guidance reports, or if we're reading the latest book from Crown or Bloomsbury or John Catt, I think it's reading it with that in mind. And I know we'll come on to that in a moment, but it's about what's happening, why, and how can we implement it as well. So where could a novice teacher start if they want to deepen their understanding of the evidence underpinning their practice? I know Sarah has mentioned that Sarah's asked a question earlier on, and she was saying she wants to get her staff more involved in reading the research around best bets practice. But where can leaders get their staff more involved, and where could a teacher who's a novice, where could they get started?
Absolutely. Well, there's plenty of ways in, and I think it's a challenge to make sure that it's balanced and measured in a way, rather than literally throwing the kitchen sink at it and getting everything in one place. It's about providing a staged way in. But for a starting point, I'd really endorse the Chartered College of Teaching. I've been a member since the very beginning, and I find that their constant focus around evidence-informed practice, but also the authentic voice of teachers through it, is a great place to start. And a membership of the Chartered College of Teaching, where you get the impact journal regularly arriving through your doorstep or wherever it arrives to, and then the updates on the web, the regular update newsletters, is a really good way of having an informed perspective, I suggest. The second one, after the Chartered College, it's free at the point of delivery. The Education Endowment Foundation website is a great place to start, and I would say that as one of our, they're the organisation that lead the Research Schools Network. But if we look at what is there, the website there, the resources there, is a treasure trove. It really is. From, if we take for a starting point, the Teaching and Learning Toolkits, it's having a big revamp. A big retrawl again over the summer, and there'll be some interesting news coming out in September. Through to the guidance reports, the library of freely available guidance reports, which provide bite-sized recommendations, but then also the opportunity to go deeper and deeper and deeper into it. So the Teaching and Learning Toolkit and the guidance reports provide that way of a good starting point into key themes that many teachers will be and leaders will be wishing to explore. There's the Research School Network, the 37 research schools, so 27 research schools and 11 associate research schools. And what we've tried to do is to provide locally based opportunities for communication events, whether they be with webinars, etc., through to programs that are bringing schools together to have a look and explore almost the two stages. Now, I think we'll probably touch this later. The key part about implementation within this, but also the DNA part of the what it is you're looking to do, whether it be social emotional learning, whether it be metacognition. And so those guidance reports provide a real rich base for research schools to be sharing that in localities. I think another part, if I might, would be the freely available high quality papers that you can access, and that's not, I say papers with inverted commas, I suppose, because you've got great sort of foundational papers, I'd suggest, like The Science of Learning from Deans for Impact, which is a really short, concise paper, but again, has links to further research if you wish to dig deeper into it. And the Science of Learning for Deans for Impact, the recently developed Great Teaching Toolkit from Evidence-Based Education, a real, once again, treasure trove of wisdom and evidence that then is aligned to thinking about what it looks like in the classroom. And then you've got the classic, Rose and Shine's Principles of Instruction, freely available, but well worth considering, not as a recipe for success in every classroom, but for one to consider and think about practice. So those papers there. And then, of course, you've then got a range of books, as you described, including Kate Jones's books, another one of the presenters on this, Alex Quigley's books about vocabulary, and the Inner Drive, again, The Science of Learning. You've got some really interesting pieces to dip into at different levels.
I've tried to scribble all of those down, Andy, so that I can put them out on Twitter, because these are incredible. And Bex said, I'm trying to multitask here by writing things down and reading the messages, but that is incredible. But and Sarah said she's going to be listening back to get all of these down. And Bex has said that she's like, yes, to Chartered College of Teaching, because I know that she is going to talk about that shortly as well.
Good.
Because I know Bex does a huge amount of work with Chartered College, and she's a big advocate as well. But I think one of the areas that I have used for I don't know however many years now is the Teaching and Learning Toolkit. I come back to that, in terms of interventions. When I was a Senko, I used the Teaching and Learning Toolkit, particularly around selecting interventions and looking at those. It wasn't my it wasn't my be all and end all, but I always factored the Teaching and Learning Toolkit in there. And I've deepened my understanding around the guidance reports. Can you tell? I haven't got a huge amount of understanding around the science of learning, but I have seen it referenced, and I think that's one of the aspects. Is we dip in and out of Twitter. Some of us dip in for longer. Maybe we are long distance swimmers, and I see reference to the art and science of learning, and I feel a little bit like, I get imposter syndrome around it, and I see people talking about it, and because I don't know about it, you get that imposter syndrome, even though I've been teaching for however many years, and that can make it really challenging. And I can't imagine how hard it is for someone who either is new to teaching or perhaps hasn't had the opportunity to even dip their toe into the evidence-informed research pond. So it's just helping people to have that more superficial understanding. Are there any, other than the Chartered College of Teaching, which is a network that offers support around evidence-informed, are there any other networks that you can recommend that teaching assistants or teachers can get involved in to sort of deepen their understanding of best practice around evidence-informed research?
I think there's an ever-growing number of them. If you're going to the ones you specifically asked there about the teaching assistant community, really, really excited at the minute to have been involved in the growth of the Suffolk TA network. So Abby Joachim in Ipswich has done an amazing piece of work over the last 2 years in developing a network, with an open network for TAs, specific to bring together practice and bring alongside evidence. And that, I think, has also been mirrored by a very exciting opportunity, which is launched just before the end of term by the team at Cambridge University Primary School, which is the Teaching Assistant Hub. Follow them both, and I think that one is set. And there's a great synergy between the two networks there in the eastern region here. And I know that I'm in conversation with both of them at the same time about trying how we bring together these opportunities. I think over the next 6 to 8 months, that Teaching Assistant Hub, the UK TA Hub, is going to be really quite a fascinating opportunity that blends that regional, like the Suffolk TA network, with other pieces. But I know that Abby's working elsewhere in the country on that. So for the TA network, once again, is available via, is from Twitter. I think that's there. You've got research school networks where you've got research schools where we have free subscription to newsletters, which keeps, on a monthly basis, keeps you updated. But then you've also got very much specific, subject specific. These aren't ones that I can roll off the tongue, but there are opportunities, that colleague Nikki Kaiser, that Norwich Research School, has long been involved in the CogSci group, where cognitive science group, and there's some really incredible rich practice from teachers and expertise being shared in very free organisations there. Then you've also got the subject networks, I'd suggest. And those subject networks, subject organisations, subject associations would be another place to start in that way.
Absolutely. I've found the Teach Me icons really helpful as well for modern foreign languages. I've learned masses, particularly during lockdown. My practice around online and my practice generally, just inspirational.
Yeah, and I think
yeah.
And I think what I've learned and what I'm learning is that when you go towards any of these networks, it's being clear about what you wish to get from the network and what you're going to. So if I'm looking at it from an evidence-informed perspective, I'll be going with a different particular lens. I'll be saying, well, hang on, I'm not going to take for granted what's being said. I'm going to be careful about thinking about what is being said. I'm going to then use my judgment to think, well, actually, does that have strength behind it? And a lot of the work we do with educational leadership and evidence leads as well is about how we can empower ourselves to be better, intelligent consumers of evidence as well, so that we're not just taking face value what is said. If I ever do watch the television, I look at horror and the Pantene or whichever adverts they are, and see 95% of people say that this is the best hair, and then at the bottom it says 12 people were. And I'm not before this goes anywhere else. I use Pantene just because I see it in our bathroom every now and again. It's not there. But the idea being that a supplier, a commercial supplier says X percent. 95%
other brands are available.
Other brands are available. That's what I'm looking for, Lizzy.
Yeah.
And but that whole part of if it's only 10 people, and there's a whole part around that is that when we go in search of ideas, if we're looking at thinking about if we can make them evidence informed, it stands a better bet of having an impact. But only if we're then clear about, well, what were the conditions this was set up within. There was a lot of work that really engaged me very early on, was the work of the learning scientists. Fascinating work that they did, and very, very early on, there's 6 strategies for effective learning. We keep coming back to them as key opportunities to consider classroom practice from early years right the way through to post 16. But we had the privilege of hosting them when they came across a number of years ago on a tour of the UK. And it was fascinating to be with them. But that whole piece about, they were well aware that the evidence that they're citing was coming a lot from American high schools and beyond, and not English context and especially not early years context. But what they've been doing increasingly is saying that this is what it is, but if you're taking it to a different perspective, consider these elements there. So whenever we go towards networks, it's just worth, I think, if you are wishing to be evidence informed, as I think we should be, it's about saying going in the awareness that let's just not take things at face value.
Absolutely. And be that intelligent reader and so on. Thank you. And thank you as well for highlighting the teaching assistant networks, because I think so much is targeted towards teachers. And it's so important that we are promoting the professional development of our teaching assistants. I was reading in the Maximising the Effectiveness of Teaching Assistants book the other week that there are more teaching assistants in England, I think, than residents of Iceland. And it's insane. We underestimate we don't, but there can be the danger of underestimating the power of our teaching assistant workforce. And as Rachel says, that's why conversation around research and practice at coalface is so important. Continuous professional dialogue in our settings is so important, or it can become a bolt-on. Absolutely. It needs to just be part of our everyday conversation. And one of the things that's so important to me, and I know to you as well, Andy, is that we remove this stigma around having professional conversations. We say to our pupils and our students all of the time, we promote this sense of cool to be clever. And, it's really important that we have this sense of being able to have these professional conversations. I find them so exciting and so stimulating. I don't want to be feeling that I've got to go and have them in corners. And I want to be able to have the same conversations with my teaching assistants, with my higher level teaching assistants, and so on, and with my office staff. So we want to be, we want to get rid of this sense of division in the schools and be having these conversations with all members of our school communities. And absolutely, it can also be divisive if some of us are attending conferences and not others. It's about making sure that every person that comes into contact with a child has the same message.
Because, it is, and I might just say that the work we're doing with Ambition Institute on the early career framework rollout, so that starts in earnest in September, their mission about always getting better, that whole piece around, it's that Dylan Williams perspective again. Every teacher can, needs to get better, not because they need to, but because they can. And that piece, but at the same time, there's a careful balance there, isn't there? With reading Megan Dixon's work in the test this week, was talking about let's always remember the power of praise, and let's always remember the opportunity to say, goodness me, what an amazing contribution teachers and TAs and leaders are making within their communities, especially over the last 18 months, etc. So it's making sure that always getting better doesn't ever become an absolute drain of always looking to the next target, rather than being able to say, what an amazing piece of implementation that has happened in that way. But you're exactly right. The culture is crucial within all of this, and those professional conversations, the autonomy, the opportunity for trust with a small t, and the whole piece around ethical leadership. The work of our Teach School Hub is pinned on ethical aspects about the Nolan principles, but also then the ethics and the values and the virtues about wisdom, standing on the shoulders of who's gone before, because all this piece around evidence, nothing is not new, it just keeps evolving. And that's one of the challenging parts of it, is that which many of us maybe took on board 10 years ago keeps changing. Now, sometimes that's very iteratively, sometimes it's quite stark. There's almost a step change. And I think it's the opportunity to be open-minded in that way. And be confident in saying, well, okay, where is the evidence for that? And if there is evidence, what's it predicated on? What are the active ingredients that it's saying? What are the key principles and practices that are underpinning that impact? And if I can then be looking for those in my own context, if I have those key principles and practices, great, I can proceed and consider using similar. If I haven't, what would need to change? And are we sufficiently devoted to changing that? And that can happen at whole school level, it can happen at trust level, it can happen, but it also brings down to the classroom level. And I think that's the important part. I often use the word about curiosity, being evidence informed. It's about being curious. And if we can take the word research out of things, people go, okay. But if we say, let's be curious, and that whole piece about being curious about what might be the impact of something in my classroom, is, I think, or in our classroom, I think is a really crucial part. And I'd really install the Institute for Effective Education. Unfortunately, it no longer exists from York University, but their resources are still available. So that's the Institute for Effective Education, and their evaluation handbook is something that we always keep going back to with this idea of a research question. And it just simply, in literally 2 lines, you can be really precise and isolate one particular part of what you wish to do. And it may, what does the impact of something for a period of time have on the attainment of a group of pupils? And that might read like, what impact does weekly mentoring with a year 12 student for 6 months have on the attainment of high priority year 9 pupil premium pupils? And so it's being very disciplined in it. It's saying, well, how precise can we make the inquiry question? And as another sort of very micro granular level of inquiry, it's something that every person in a school can do.
Absolutely, and everyone can get on board with that as well.
And it's not about writing. It's not about writing up a huge thesis about it. It's saying, well, it's okay. Well, if I've been disciplined in saying, well, here's where I started. Here's my baseline. This is what I was seeking to measure, and then going through and, well, here's some of the milestones of how it was progressing. And look at this. This is, by the end of it, what has happened and what has seemed to be happened. It's about sharing that. And we've seen that work really well, and others across the Research School network as well. It's not about producing huge theses. It's about maybe an opportunity for a conversation. It's about a poster, a conversation around. But that sort of disciplined inquiry, once again, is something that can bring it right down to the classroom level, as well as considering what this might look like as a cultural piece for a whole school or group of schools.
Absolutely. And I think that answers Sarah's question from earlier about around how to bring staff on board around best bets evidence. And like Rachel says, stealing your analogy around a well-known shampoo brand, if we have strong, convincing voices selling their brand, it's important that there's wider knowledge to be able to challenge respectfully and confidently, and discuss further when necessary. And I think that's how a vision cascades across the school and across a wider trust. It's about being able to have that voice, feel empowered without fear of recrimination or judgment. And that's how we would want our pupils and students to feel. And that's what we as teachers encourage our students to have. And I find it ironic that in schools, teachers feel this way. And we need to, I was talking about this earlier on when I was saying about the guilt that I feel around elements and how I need to speak to myself. They always say, speak to yourself with the same voice that you would speak to your best friend. And we need to speak to ourselves with the same voice as we would speak to our pupils. And I think this is absolutely key. But no, that's great. I've got one last question for you, Andy, if I may.
Yeah. Yes.
Which evidence informed book or which educational guidance or which edu-related book or document would make it onto your desert island disk drive? Some of the early career teachers may not know what a disk drive is, but I'm sure they've got the idea.
Well, if I'm going to see if I can be cheeky. If I can have a subscription, I'm going to have continue my subscription to the Child and College Teaching, because that'll keep a pattern going through. If I'm allowed to smuggle another one in, it would definitely be my well used. It's its second piece, the EF guidance report on implementation. Because if I'm on a desert island, I've got to think about things I've never considered and implement them really well. So that's just a great sort of grounder and a baseline for that. And then if I'm allowed a third one, I think it would have to be in the Drive's 99 studies that every teacher should know, because I just find it fascinating when you look at the depths of what is available in terms of what has been found to have an impact in the past and what it might bring to a different context.
That's absolutely brilliant. So just the 99 studies that our listeners need to read before September starts.
Yeah.
Exactly. 99.
But if I'm on, it started a couple of years ago with I think it was 77, and now they've updated to 99. But if I'm on a desert island, I've got plenty of time, and I don't need to rush it. So in that way, I can maybe do it justice.
Absolutely. And you could always make a shelter out of the 98 that you didn't really like.
Well, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's amazing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try my very, very best to get all of these out in a Twitter thread. But this is absolutely fantastic. I can't thank you enough, Andy. And, it's sparked some great debate amongst our listeners and some interesting comments. But thank you so much for your time during the holidays. And because it's really hard, as we know, kicking back into gear, thinking about research. And thank you for everything that you shared with us. Really grateful.
It's a pleasure. Well, it's a lens to look at things through, and I think it comes alongside what we do, and it helps us make better judgments, and it makes better judgments for those we serve. And I think that's really, really important.
Excellent. Thank you so much, and have a great holiday.
Great. Thank you, Lizzy.
Thanks, Bye. Andy. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
So what we're going to be doing now is we're going to have a short break to listen to our news.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
This is your latest Teachers Talk Radio News with Gail Glenn. In Scotland, the First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has announced that the wearing of face masks and social distancing in schools will remain for the first 6 weeks of the new academic year, which begins around the 16th of August. She stated that this also reflects the unique environment of schools, where large numbers of unvaccinated children and young people mix with adult staff. So for up to 6 weeks, subject then to review, there will be a continued requirements for staff to keep at least 1 metre distance from each other and from children and young people while on the school estate. She said, We have also decided, after careful consideration, to retain the current requirements for face coverings in schools for staff and for children aged 12 or over. This includes asking young people and staff in secondary schools to wear face coverings during lessons and while inside school buildings. The First Minister also announced a further £10 million to local authorities to be allocated for improved ventilation and CO2 monitoring equipment in schools. In England, research carried out by Oxford Homeschooling using Department for Education data has monitored the largest increase and decreases in bullying exclusions between 2018-19 and 2019-20. Barking in Dagenham was the largest hotspot, showing a 200% increase in the number of suspensions and permanent exclusions from bullying. Figures were shown to more than double in 10 local authorities. Nationally across England, the data is more positive, and this is thought to be the result of school closures affecting the amount of time which students spent in contact with one another. The number of bullying exclusions fell by 31% in 2019-20. Greg Smith, Head of Operations at Oxford Homeschooling, said, "These new exclusion figures cover the whole of the 2019-20 school year. But with the final term being conducted during lockdown, it's interesting to see how the data compares to previous totals. In many ways, the measures introduced during the pandemic, like reduced class sizes and increased supervision, have helped address the country's bullying problem. So it will be interesting to see if schools try to adopt some of these permanently, even though restrictions are easing." This has been your daily education news briefing.
So absolutely delighted to have had Andy Samways, Director of Unity Research School and Unity Teaching School Hub, join us to talk us through evidence-informed practice and how you can dip your toe into the getting yourself started with some reading and how that can inform your practice in the classroom. Some of the reading research that he touched on, I'm going to try and get that into a Twitter thread for you after the programme, but some of the reading that he was talking about was around the Chartered College of Teaching subscription and their impact news magazine. I was trying to say the word then and my mind went absolutely blank. I was trying to say brochure. That's a terrible word. But also the Education Endowment Foundation free website with a teaching learning toolkit, guidance reports, free access to the research school networks and their events and newsletters, science of learning, which is one that I don't really know much about, so I'm going to be looking into that. The Great Teaching Toolkit, Rosenshines, and also the networks for teaching assistants as well, the TA Hub on Twitter, and the Suffolk TA Network, obviously Suffolk based, but UK TA Hub, Nikki Kaiser, who is now Director of the Norwich Research School, Cogsite Science, and the Learning Scientists website that some of you may have already spent some time diving into. And his Desert Island disk drive, which turned out to be about, I think, 102 documents as opposed to one, with the EEF Guides to Implementation, and the Inner Drive 99 studies. It's got 99 studies, but Inner Drive is one, I think was what he was going with, that one. But I'll try and get all of that out into a Twitter thread. We're going to have a short advert break in a moment. And after that, we're going to be joined by Rebecca Waker. You may know her as Rebecca Nobes. And congratulations on your recent nuptials. Bex is lead practitioner for modern foreign languages. She is a council member for the Chartered College of Teaching. She's coordinator of Teach Meet MFL Icons. And I don't know how she fits it all in. She is the mastermind behind Page Practice Podcast. We're going to be welcoming Bex very, very shortly. But before that, let's hear from our sponsors.
Every teacher loves stationery, right? Imagine getting a selection of fun, beautiful and unique stationery items designed and selected especially for teachers, delivered through your door every month. You need to check out teacherslovestationery.club.
I'm always so excited when the box arrives. It's such a treat.
My Teachers Love Stationery Club box is just a little treat to myself every month.
It's always full of delightful and surprising items, including some really good quality stationery brands like Faber-Castell and Stabilo.
And because you never know what you're going to get, it makes it even more fun and special when you get it.
It feels really great to be supporting a family business that's run by real teachers. I can't help feeling like they just know what I'm going to enjoy using stationery-wise better than I do myself.
Visit teacherslovestationery.club and enter the code TTRadio when you buy your first stationery box to save £2 today. teacherslovestationery.club.
Okay, so I'm just going to welcome Bex in. Hi, Bex, how are you doing?
Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Oh, I can hear you wonderfully. How are you?
Perfect. I'm not too bad, thank you.
How are your kittens today? That's what I really want to know.
Well, you know what? I'd come in here because they've been sitting nice and quietly, and now that I've started talking, one of them's come to sit with me. Hopefully, he'll just sit nice and quietly, and we'll be all right.
And for those of you that don't already know, Bex has had 2 new kittens called Buzz. Is it Buzz and Woody?
Buzz and Woody, yeah. Small obsession with Toy Story in this house.
Yeah. And how old are they?
They're 8.5 weeks, and they arrived just yesterday, so it's all very new this morning.
Yeah, it is very new, and I've hijacked her to her first morning with her new kittens, and I've hijacked her, but they are absolutely gorgeous. So please have a look online; they're beautiful. And thank you so much for joining us, Bex. How do you fit all of this in? You're incredible.
Well, it's when you were listing that, I'm not really sure actually.
And and how long ago was your wedding?
On Friday.
And you also run your own business as well.
I've been doing a little bit of that. I have to say I've knocked it on the head for a little while, but I did have a little spate during lockdown of what could I do that wasn't teaching related, and I found myself, I was making lots of things for the wedding, and I found myself thinking, oh, I could do this. So I've been making bags and bottles and personalised bits, but no, I haven't done very much of that for a while, understandably.
Did you find that it helped? Did it find it helped having something outside of teaching and education? Did you find it helped well-being wise, or did you find
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely, it made me do something different. Everything else that I do is very much all to do with teaching, which I don't find problematic, and I'll talk about that in a bit, I guess. But because I separate it very much from my actual work to my stuff to do with education that I enjoy doing. But it has been good to have something completely different.
How do you manage all of the different projects that you've got going on and still be successful and have an incredibly, and have 2 kittens arrive in the house, which for most people would be chaos, and recently be promoted and have all of these? How do you manage your time effectively? Because I think that's one of the questions that people will want to know.
Yeah, I don't have a solid answer, I don't think. I think I've been very strict with myself from maybe the year after my NQT. I had a wobble, as I think a lot of people do in their NQT, of, oh, this is too much, I don't know what I'm doing. And since I had that, I got very strict with myself and went, you know what? I'm going to very much separate where I will do my planning and where I'll do my marking and what does and doesn't come home. And I think because I got into that kind of habit quite early on of work generally stays at work, and it means I go in early and I stay there a bit later. But it means for me that if it's to do with my actual school job, it stays in school. And then that gives me the time at home to do these other things that I like to engage in.
Amazing. As Brene Brown, the goddess, would say, it's boundaries.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, great. It's hard, and it's habits.
It is.
Habits are about training, and but hats off to you. Incredibly successful. It's great. Oh, absolutely. That works so well for me until I had children and pickups. Yeah, I know. I hear you. And And one of the challenges I faced was it worked really well for me with children until the COVID decimated my childcare. But I think it's about trying to get those boundaries in place and routine, and I think we have to be kind to ourselves when it falls apart, and trying to give ourselves permission. And I do find it helps when you know other people who are sailing in this storm in the same kind of boat as you.
Oh, definitely.
And but wherever possible, if you can, have boundaries around turning your email off, and not having it on your phone and things like that. But it's good to hear that you are leaving work stuff at work and things like that, and you've got those sorts of boundaries in, because that will be that role model for other people coming through early on in their careers.
Oh, I'd like to hope so. I'm mentoring I was going to say NQT, and it's not that anymore, is it? I'm mentoring an ECT in September.
Yeah.
So, yeah, hopefully that's something that I can share with her a little bit.
Please do, because when I was an NQT, I was told by my mentor, as was at the time, that if I had an anniversary or a birthday on a parents' evening, I could forget about it because school came first. And if I wasn't working until midnight every weeknight, then I was doing it wrong.
Wow.
So yeah, absolutely. So there needs to be a cultural shift, and that's where
Exactly.
mentors like you are where we're going to keep the best teachers in education. So thank you. Boundaries. Right, let's get back onto it. Otherwise, I'll never stop talking about well-being. Right, and this is why I've got you here. But it's inspirational to hear you, Bex. Can you remember the first book related to education and sort of evidence-informed practice or pedagogy that you bought or were given?
Well, I was thinking about this, and I remember I did just after my because I did school direct, but I did school direct with a PGC. So just after that year, I wrote a little blog about the books I'd been reading and looking at it and the differences between the books that I'd been told that I had to read and the things that I had voluntarily picked up. So I'm going to go for one of the ones that I first voluntarily picked up, which was Daisy Christodoulou's 7 Myths About Education.
Oh, good one.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the first things that started to get me questioning, I guess, the things that had been fairly accepted in what I'd been told. And so I think for me, that's probably one of the ones that made the biggest difference early on. It made me start thinking, oh, okay, there are other ways of thinking out there. There's other things going on. Let's have a look.
I remember seeing Daisy at Research Ed, and it was a really, really, really hot day, and the room was absolutely rammed. It was like a theatre, and she had a graph up on the screen, and the school I was at the time wasn't very research informed. I had absolutely no idea what she was talking about, and I had to go away and do so much research. And it was so alienating though, and I had the worst imposter syndrome, like I was referring to before.
Yeah.
But what a great start with Daisy C. Mine was Sue Cowley, Getting the Buggers to Behave.
Oh, yeah.
And this was 20 years ago, or 19 years ago, but I still love that book. And I still buy that book for people. Love it. But I'd love to know if there's any other people listening, if they remember or they've got their first book, what it was. But that's a solid first book, Daisy's. And how has your understanding of evidence-informed practice evolved since then?
I think massively, in terms of, well, not in terms of, but just the changes that have happened. I think I started teaching at the right time in a way, because when I first started, I got straight away involved with going to things like Research Ed and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think I've kind of ridden that wave over the last 7 going into 8 years now of the, not changes, but the I don't like the word trend either, but the direction things are moving in. So I think maybe because I started at that point, it's always kind of been that way for me in a way. But I certainly I was a bit of I called myself a bit of a lone wolf when I was an NQT and at my second school. I just felt like it wasn't something other people were engaged with. So I've had to be quite self-directed about my involvement with kind of the evidence informed practice and whatever. But I think the chartered college, and I know Andy's already talked about it, has made a massive difference there for me.
That's interesting, because my next question, and it sort of leads on neatly from that, is about, do you think the culture of the school that you're in shapes a teacher or a teaching assistant's ability to engage in evidence-informed practice and the research around it?
Massively. And I think you have to, if you know you're interested and are able to be self-directed about it and go with it, great. But you have to be willing to put yourself out there to do that. So the amount of things, and I surprise myself when I think about it, that I went to on my own, all the Research Ed kind of stuff that I went to on my own really early on, and the decision to do my master's in education when some people around me were thinking like, why on earth are you doing that? You have to be quite determined about it, because if people around you aren't interested, you start to question whether, oh, is this something I should be interested in? Why am I doing this? And I've seen someone refer to it as being a bit of a teacher geek, and other people saying to you like, why are you reading about teaching? And you have to stand your ground and say, I'm doing it because I enjoy it. And yes, the school can make a massive difference.
I think this is something that I've seen mention of, but I tend to block and ignore or scroll on. But there is this kind of debate and perceived stigma around ongoing research and professional development during weekends or school holidays.
Yes.
And it sounds to me like you've experienced that stigma. Can you offer any advice? I mean, you already have. You've said stand your ground, be determined. But any advice to other teachers who may have seen or felt that stigma?
I think just as with anything, it's like the going and in the holidays and doing displays and all that kind of stuff, isn't it? If it makes you happy, if you're happy to be doing it, then do it. If at any point you think, oh, why am I doing this? Or I don't want to be doing this, then you've got a problem. But if you're quite happy to be, I will during the holidays do reading and those kinds of things. And obviously there'll be planning to do, but I'll leave it till the end. And if it's not directly related to my actual day-to-day job and I want to do it, then I'll get on and do it. And I think to an extent it's just about doing what makes you happy, and ignoring people telling you what to do. So yeah, there has definitely been some discussion, let's say, over I think about a week ago, to do with people reading during the holidays. And I think we just don't do each other any favors when we make other teachers feel bad about how they choose to spend their time. We wouldn't do that to the kids. If the kids were wanting to read up about, let's say, their favorite subject, science, and they want to read up on a particular topic over the holiday, we wouldn't tell them not to do that, would we? So why are we doing that to each other?
Absolutely, totally agree with you. And be empowered by the block button.
Yes.
Block and mute. And you can mute. I never knew this, but going back again to Sue Cowley, that I followed her once, and when she was talking about how to mute keywords. During the summer period, if you mute keywords, block people. You wouldn't allow these people to come in and sit in your lounge and have a cup of tea. So don't allow them into your mind. So block and unfollow people that follow them, because otherwise they end up creeping in. So just scroll on. You don't have to allow these people into your lounge or into your mind. And choice is one of the best aspects of our profession, says Sarah. Absolutely. And I think Rachel's point is key. I think the fact when professional development feels like a bolt-on and separate from our classroom practice, this is when that culture becomes a challenge around how we perceive research and evidence-informed practice. Because if we don't, this is the challenge, isn't it? It's around understanding why we're doing what we're doing.
And I think going back to what Rachel said about it feeling like a bolt-on, I think the school culture makes all the difference to that. The certain schools, it feels like you're having to do that extra if you want to do it, because it's not necessarily being given to you. In other schools where it's really part of everything and that's done, and it doesn't feel like a bolt-on. And I think there's not enough schools yet, I don't think, where it's so part of the natural and the everyday, where it doesn't feel like a bolt on an extra session or a go and do some extra reading because you want to. I think we're on the way in some areas, but we're not there yet.
I mean, I'm really interested. Adam's picked up on the point about mentoring and allowing mentees to talk and the mentor listening actively, and that's so important. And I'm really interested, particularly through the early career framework and the guiding the early career teacher to read, but also about how that conversation and the coaching route with the mentor, and how that's going to be, the early career teacher will be encouraged, and how that will be reflected back from the mentor in a school that doesn't necessarily have that culture around ongoing professional development and evidence-informed practice. I'm just wondering, from your experience, how that might play out.
Yeah, I don't know either, I have to say. I think could be quite difficult, couldn't it? Having if you're engaged in that way and you want to pass that on, but it's not part of what's going on around you, because it's all well and good a mentor telling a mentee, oh, this is what's happening, and look at this and that and the other. But if they're not seeing everybody kind of being engaged with it, they might not see the benefits so much. So no, there's definitely a difficulty there, and I don't think I've got a solution off the top of my head.
No, I think, there's some coming through that staff have an agency over their focus, and Libby's saying that it's really important that you take ownership over your research, and if it's forced on you, staff can move away from that sense. So it's about, and Sarah's saying about their school's vision and focus being based on the Great Teaching Toolkit evidence review for that very reason, and that's helpful as a starting point. But going back to your podcast, and how has it stimulated your own awareness and your understanding of evidence-informed practice? Has there been anything that surprised you?
I think maybe it's something else that then led to the podcast. I guess that the podcast kind of came from me involved with things to do with evidence-informed practice, mostly to do with doing the Chartered Teacher Programme.
Yeah.
And because of doing that, I think that's where the podcast then came from. So I think the understanding led to the podcast rather than the podcast to the understanding, I guess. But I think it's gone a lot further than I ever expected it to, in terms of how many people have got involved. And it's really interesting to hear all sorts of different interpretations of the same bits of reading and how different people have applied the same thing to their practice. So it's been eye-opening, because I've got to hear from a lot of people in a lot of subject areas. There's been a fair few languages teachers coming on, but definitely they're not in the majority. So it's been really interesting to hear how other subject areas are talking about.
And has it changed the trajectory of your career? I know you're now moving into a lead practititioner role. Has it changed where you want to go?
I think it's helped give me a little bit more kind of confidence, and then it has shaped things a little bit for me. I think I started it knowing that I was really interested in kind of leading whole school teaching and learning kind of things. So I think when I started, roughly where I wanted to go with it, but it's made me feel more confident in terms of, yeah, actually I could do that, because it's about realizing that you don't need to know it all. It's having the connections to other people who do know, or knowing where to go to speak to people about certain things. So yeah, no, I think it has made a difference.
And I think that humility is so key, especially in leadership, is knowing that you don't have to know it all. I think that's one of the traits of the best leaders that I've worked with.
Oh, absolutely.
Is knowing that you don't know it all, but knowing where to go to get the best people who know what you need to know. That is the worst. I think I need to get someone else to put that in, like on a t-shirt or something. But the best leaders acknowledge that they don't have all the answers, but they likely know where to go to get those answers, and they have that dynamic within their team, or they can outsource. I think that is absolutely key.
No, I think that's what social media has really helped give us as well. And like I said, having kind of been involved on that kind of level from day one, but I feel like there's lots of networks out there to dip into. Was asked something, I could dip in somewhere else,
Are there any networks that you would recommend that teachers, teaching assistants, staff in schools could engage with?
Just trying to think above and beyond what Andy already mentioned earlier. So I'd say the use of social media for positive purposes, and knowing how to I'm losing an earphone, sorry. And knowing how to kind of dip in and out of that, and so that all the subject specific networks that are around on things like Twitter and Instagram seems to be growing for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I only know from a language teacher perspective, on Instagram we've got hashtag MFL Insta, and there's a lot of people there. And then of course we've got things like MFL chat on Twitter, and other subjects have got similar. I know there's definitely a maths and a geography, and use those more informal networks, as well as the subject associations and the Chartered College of Teaching that I know Andy mentioned earlier. It's really, really powerful, really powerful.
Yeah, I don't know if it's because MFL teachers are so we love Canva, and we love a bit of making things pretty.
Yeah.
But I found Instagram is a huge growing community, and there's less opportunity for debate, I think, on Instagram, and
Yes.
there's a great sharing of resources and on there as well. So it's a social media community to dive into as well. I've got one last question for you, please, which please don't make it 99, but which book would make it onto your desert island disk drive?
Oh, I honestly don't know. I was thinking about this earlier, and I looked on my shelf and I was overwhelmed.
I know, I thought you would
maybe making every lesson count.
Oh, great choice.
Because that then applies to lots of people. There's the subject specific versions. Yeah, let's go for that. Making every lesson count.
That is an absolutely brilliant choice, and I'll put that in my Twitter feed as well. Bex, can't thank you enough. I'll let you get back to Buzz and Woody, and thank you so much. And I can't wait for the next series of Page Practice podcast. Thank you so much.
If anyone's got any recommendations of books to cover, I'd really appreciate it. And I know you have.
I've sent in loads, but if they can message you on Twitter.
Yeah.
Brilliant, with their recommendations for any books around education that you can feature in your next series.
Yeah, lovely. That's great. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining me on my first breakfast show with Teachers Talk Radio. Hopefully I'll be back next week. And if you want to join me, please do get in touch. I would love to hear from you. And thank you so much for being with me. I'll see you soon. Have a fantastic day. Thank you.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.